The atmosphere at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport tonight was unlike anything typically seen for an incoming tennis player. From the first signs of gathering near Terminal 2, it became clear that this was not a routine arrival but a moment of exceptional public attention. The energy spread rapidly through the terminal area, with anticipation building outside the glass walls as crowds filled the surrounding spaces. What unfolded felt closer to the arrival of a global sporting icon than a young athlete stepping off an international flight. Yet this was neither a football squad nor a global entertainment act arriving in Paris. It was Alexandra Eala, representing the Philippines, whose presence triggered an extraordinary response across the airport. Reports from French media, airport staff, and travelers described scenes of surprise as large groups of supporters filled the area, waving flags and creating a vivid, coordinated display of national pride. Under normal circumstances, tennis professionals move quietly through airports with minimal attention, accompanied only by close team members. On this occasion, however, that expectation was completely overturned. Members of the Filipino community from across France and neighboring regions gathered in significant numbers to welcome Eala, in a rare show of collective enthusiasm. The atmosphere intensified as chants grew louder, coordinated cheers echoed through the terminal, and the space began to resemble a sporting venue rather than a transport hub. Observers noted that the energy inside the airport reached an unprecedented level for a tennis arrival, drawing attention from onlookers who appeared genuinely surprised by the scale of the reception. For many witnessing the scene, it was evident that Alexandra Eala's rise extends beyond sport alone, evolving into a broader symbol of national pride and international recognition. Even the typically reserved French public and media appeared struck by the intensity of the moment, with journalists acknowledging they had seldom seen an airport arrival for a tennis player generate such widespread emotion and engagement. The sheer scale of support transformed an ordinary night in Paris into a truly unforgettable spectacle centered on Alexandra Eala. What began as a routine arrival quickly evolved into a scene where sport and culture merged with remarkable intensity, leaving French media searching for words to accurately capture what they had witnessed. Across television coverage, social platforms, and sports headlines, one question repeatedly emerged. Who is this young athlete capable of drawing such an overwhelming response even before stepping onto the clay courts of Paris? In France, many observers expressed surprise at the magnitude of attention surrounding Eala, prompting wider discussion about how the Philippines has produced a tennis talent who carries national expectations with such composure, confidence, and maturity at a young age. Beyond the immediate reaction, attention quickly shifted to what this moment signifies for the tournament itself. The growing interest around Alexandra Eala is no longer confined to regional narratives in Southeast Asia. It has now extended into Europe with undeniable momentum. From the moment she moved through the airport amid an extraordinary wave of support, the atmosphere surrounding the event shifted noticeably. What was once viewed as a standard tournament setting quickly took on a different identity, shaped by energy, emotion, and global engagement. The competition is now being seen through a broader lens, evolving beyond rankings and match results into something more symbolic, a movement driven by cultural pride and international connection. At the center of it stands Alexandra Eala, a young athlete who rose through the junior ranks with distinction and is now stepping into the professional stage under global attention. Supporting her is a rapidly growing international fan base whose presence continues to amplify every appearance she makes, turning each match into a moment of collective anticipation and global focus. That is why Paris is buzzing tonight, and why the French sporting world appears genuinely taken aback by what has unfolded. To understand the significance of this arrival, one must look beyond the airport scenes and viral footage and consider the deeper context behind the moment, the emergence of a global sporting figure, and the cultural momentum now surrounding European tennis. The growing attention around Alexandra Eala is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader shift in how audiences are engaging with the sport. To understand why this moment has resonated so strongly in France, it is important to trace the development of Alexandra Eala herself. Professional tennis has long been defined by tradition, structure, and a strong emphasis on composure and restraint. Within that framework, Eala has distinguished herself as a player who brings a more dynamic and fearless approach to the court. Her journey did not begin in Paris. It was shaped years earlier at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, where she refined a game built on discipline, intensity, and relentless competitiveness. Each stage of her progression has prepared her for moments of heightened global attention such as this. By the time she arrived in France, she was no longer viewed simply as another name in the draw by her supporters. Instead, she represented a broader sense of national pride for the Philippines, a country increasingly establishing its presence in international sport. What has surprised many observers in France is not only the scale of support, but also the intensity of emotion surrounding it. In contrast to the traditionally reserved atmosphere of European tennis, where appreciation is often expressed through quiet applause and controlled reactions, the response from Filipino fans reflects a more expressive and deeply emotional connection to sport, rooted in unity, pride, and collective identity. When thousands of Filipino supporters declared their intention to welcome Alexandra Eala in Paris, it was not a casual expression of enthusiasm, but the beginning of a coordinated wave of anticipation that built steadily in the days leading up to her arrival. Groups organized travel from various parts of the Paris metropolitan area, while others journeyed from cities such as Marseille, Lyon, Nice, and even neighboring countries, connecting through online communities that had been mobilizing well in advance. Social media played a central role in amplifying this momentum, turning individual excitement into a unified and highly visible display of support. What emerged in France was a level of sporting passion more commonly associated with major football nights in European stadiums, now directed toward a young tennis player representing the Philippines on the international stage. This shift challenged the usual expectations of tennis culture in the country and reshaped the atmosphere surrounding her arrival. The impact of this movement became most evident at the airport, which quickly evolved into the focal point of the entire event. According to reports from airport personnel, security measures had to be reassessed and reinforced multiple times prior to the flight's landing due to the unexpectedly large turnout. Initial estimates reportedly anticipated only a modest group of supporters, but the reality proved far greater in scale, with crowds forming that transformed the terminal environment into something resembling a large public gathering rather than a standard sporting reception. As Alexandra Eala entered public view, the scene intensified further, with continuous camera flashes and heightened emotion throughout the terminal, creating an atmosphere more reminiscent of a high-profile public appearance than an airport arrival. Among those present were longtime supporters who had traveled significant distances by train, carrying Philippine flags and handmade messages of encouragement. Families and younger fans stood alongside them, all contributing to a collective expression of national pride centered on a rising athlete whose presence had drawn extraordinary attention well beyond the traditional boundaries of tennis. Seeing children perched on their parents' shoulders, watching Alexandra Eala with the kind of admiration usually reserved for global icons, underscored just how unusual this moment had become. In tennis, this level of emotional connection is exceptionally rare. Many players spend years, even decades, building recognition through titles and rankings before reaching this kind of global attention. Yet Eala has generated it through something more immediate, becoming a symbol of aspiration and national pride for an entire country. The impact of this phenomenon is already being felt across the French tennis landscape. Tournament organizers are now facing a scenario that falls outside conventional planning: how to manage a traveling supporter base that transforms every venue into a perceived home environment for a player competing far from her country of origin. While Roland Garros and other major French tournaments are accustomed to passionate crowds, the nature of this support is distinctly different. Filipino fans do not simply observe matches, they actively participate in them, bringing coordinated chants, continuous flag displays, and a sustained level of energy that reshapes the atmosphere inside the stadium. For opponents, this creates an environment that can feel unusually intense, where the balance of crowd energy may appear to tilt heavily toward Eala regardless of location. French media have even described the atmosphere as a peaceful wave of celebration, a phrase that captures both the scale and positivity of the phenomenon unfolding across Paris. Beyond the spectacle, however, there is a competitive dimension that continues to draw attention. Alexandra Eala is not only a rising public figure, but also a serious contender on court. Her development at the Rafa Nadal Academy has equipped her with tactical discipline, technical precision, and a level of match intelligence that reflects years of structured elite training. Her left-handed serve immediately disrupts opponents' rhythm, pulling them wide and opening angles that allow her to dictate points with controlled aggression and consistent baseline pressure. On clay, this combination becomes even more effective, as she blends patience with sudden acceleration, maintaining composure in long rallies while still striking decisively when opportunities appear. Analysts increasingly suggest that her game is built not just for competitiveness, but for impact at the highest level, with the potential to challenge established names in major tournaments. What has particularly caught the attention of the French tennis community is the growing recognition that Alexandra Eala is not arriving in Paris as a conventional underdog or symbolic participant. Instead, she is being viewed as a legitimate competitive presence on clay, a surface deeply embedded in France's tennis identity and tradition. Within that context, her confidence and adaptability have stood out, especially as she appears comfortable operating within conditions that are often considered demanding even for seasoned professionals. Adding to this competitive narrative is the visible wave of support surrounding her. The phrase 50,000 Pinoys ready, once an online expression of enthusiasm, has evolved into a widely referenced description of a coordinated and highly active fan movement. Across France and nearby regions, members of the Filipino community have reportedly spent weeks organizing travel, preparing coordinated apparel, distributing flags, and arranging structured cheering groups in anticipation of her matches. This level of preparation has drawn significant attention locally, as it differs from the typical pattern seen at international tennis events, where support is usually dispersed rather than centrally organized around a single player. The scale and coordination of this community presence have highlighted the strong cohesion and cultural unity of the Filipino diaspora in Europe. Beyond the sporting dimension, it has also become a broader demonstration of identity and collective engagement, reshaping how audiences in France experience and interpret international tennis atmospheres. Beyond the sporting narrative, Alexandra Eala's arrival has also triggered a notable commercial shift, with French and international brands beginning to reassess her rising global influence. The unprecedented scenes surrounding her reception have reframed how businesses interpret athlete popularity, not merely as fan engagement, but as access to a highly motivated and emotionally invested global audience. As a result, attention from luxury fashion houses in Paris and leading sportswear companies has started to converge on the young Filipina star, recognizing the expanding commercial potential tied to her growing visibility. Eala's profile now extends beyond regional recognition, positioning her as part of a new generation of athletes whose appeal bridges multiple markets, particularly linking Asia's rapidly growing sports audience with established European tennis culture. This intersection has created a unique marketing space that sponsors and global partners are increasingly attentive to, given its combination of cultural reach and competitive relevance. However, perhaps the most compelling aspect of this development is the psychological dimension surrounding Eala herself. For many emerging athletes, the presence of large, emotionally charged crowds can create significant pressure. Yet in the footage of her arrival, she appears composed, responsive, and genuinely engaged with the atmosphere around her. Rather than showing signs of being overwhelmed, she acknowledges the crowd with calm confidence and visible appreciation, suggesting an ability to absorb external energy and convert it into focus rather than distraction. This response may prove to be one of her most defining traits in the competition ahead. It reflects a growing awareness of her evolving role, not only as a rising competitor in professional tennis, but as a figure carrying broader expectations and attention on an international stage. As a result, she is no longer perceived simply as a promising talent progressing through the rankings, but as an athlete whose presence now resonates far beyond the court, shaping narratives that extend into culture, identity, and global sporting influence. Among her supporters, she has increasingly been regarded as a people's champion, a role shaped as much by emotion and identity as by athletic performance. This is one of the key reasons French media have been so intrigued by her composure in the midst of such an overwhelming public response. Observers have described her presence as calm, composed, and remarkably steady despite the intensity unfolding around her arrival. That contrast between external chaos and internal control is what many are calling her defining trait, an uncommon ability to remain grounded at the center of a highly charged atmosphere. As the story behind the 50,000 Pinoys ready movement becomes more widely understood, it reveals a deeper layer than typical sports fandom. A significant number of those present at the airport were overseas Filipino workers and families who have spent years building lives far from their home country.